ADHD Rewired, episode 535. Since 2014, this has been the podcast for ADHD adults who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and an ADHD certified clinical services provider by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. You can learn about our coaching and accountability groups, our virtual co-working community, and more, all at ADHDrewired.com. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Learn more about our offerings, including our monthly live Q&As, get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter, and more, all at ADHDrewired.com. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. Don't forget to hit subscribe or follow on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Hey friends, I don't usually release episodes over the weekend, but one, you're going to love it this episode, especially if you know my guest, Dr. Roberto Olivardia. But two, for those of you who have been thinking about joining our coaching and accountability groups this summer, this Monday we're hosting our last early bird registration event. After Monday, the price is going to go from $9.99 to $11.99. And as we get closer to the start of summer sessions, that price may go up again. The event is at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 Eastern. Go to coachingrewired.com to learn more. Make sure to get your name on our interest list, and we'll send you everything you'll need to join us. To ensure that you get your invitation to join us on Monday, please try to do everything you can to submit your pre-registration requirements by 8 p.m. Pacific on Sunday. While I will try, but I can't guarantee to process any late submissions, please do try to get your submissions in at that time. And just last Thursday, we actually had someone sign up who said they've been thinking about joining us for 4 years. Maybe that you've been thinking about this for a while too. And oh my God, sorry. There's a big flock of geese literally right outside of my office window. And there's baby geese too. The biggest one is literally right outside my window with its head sticking up. You know what? I think they're probably looking for the web address. It's coachingrewired.com. All right, let's get on with some mischief and shenanigans with my friend and colleague, Dr. Roberto Olivardia. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. So we have returning to the podcast, I don't even remember how many times you have been on, is Dr. Roberto Olivardia. Dr. Olivardia is a clinical psychologist and lecturer at Harvard Medical School. He maintains a private practice in Lexington, Massachusetts, where he specializes in the treatment of ADHD, body dysmorphic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and eating disorders in males. He is on the professional and scientific advisory boards for CHAD, and for ADA and Attitude. And he is also a featured expert for understood.org. Dr. Olivardia has lived experience as someone with ADHD and learning differences, as well as being the parent of 2 teenagers with ADHD and dyslexia. Welcome back to the podcast.
Great to be here, Eric. It's always fun. I was looking forward to this.
Do you remember how many times you've been on?
I was thinking, so I know I did the eating, sleep. I think we did one on bipolar disorder.
Did we do one on OCD? I think you did.
OCD, dyslexia.
You might be like the most recurring guest.
I might be like the Alec Baldwin of Saturday Night Live, maybe, but for your podcast. I think at least 5 or 6 times. It's always a pleasure.
For any new listener who doesn't know, Roberto, I think you'll see why we keep having him back on, because he's just a really fun guest. He's brilliant and fun, and that's a fun combination for a podcast. So
it's always a pleasure.
When we were exploring kind of what could we talk about on the podcast, one of the suggestions that you had, and I love it, I'm like, let's do this, is the idea of the appeal of mischief and danger for people with ADHD.
Absolutely. This was partly inspired by a couple of things. So one, my own experience, which we'll get into. But one is I am treating this boy. He's 14 with ADHD, very nice kid. And his mom said, I'm a little bit concerned because her son, he's not conduct disordered, he's not sociopathic. She goes, but he kind of is drawn towards being like a little bad, like, and not, she was not in ways that are like illegal or anything like that, but he's not a rule follower, and he kind of likes to stir things up in some ways. And she was concerned about it. And so I, assessed what the examples that she had provided, these examples, and they weren't anything clinically that I'd be concerned about. But then I shared with her, because I'm very open about my own ADHD. And I said, well, to be honest, I am very much wired in a similar way, even now, isn't at my age now, but particularly as a kid. I definitely like the idea of being like a little bad. And I did I loved, one of my favorite words, Eric, is shenanigans. That's one of my all-time top 10 favorite words is shenanigans. And when I first heard that word in third grade, and Miss Wade, my third grade teacher, said, and I said, what is that? It just sounded fun, like just the word shenanigans. And she described it like it's sort of, I remember her saying something like, it's just things that are a little bit, you're not always supposed to do. You're kind of getting into shenanigans. Because she said to me, she goes, don't get into shenanigans. And I'm like, what does that mean? And she's describing like a little trouble, but it's like innocent kind of trouble. And I was like, oh, I love that word. And so that became my mantra. Anytime I was doing something I probably wasn't supposed to, or definitely not supposed to do, I say to my friends, oh, it's shenanigans. It's all shenanigans. But I said to this mom, that's kind of part of ADHD is there's that need and that orientation towards stimulation isn't always just in the form of pleasure. I mean, everything that's pleasurable is stimulating, but not that everything, that's stimulating doesn't always necessarily have to be pleasurable. Like danger is very stimulating. Anxiety can be stimulating. Conflict is stimulating. I wouldn't say that those are all pleasurable things, but I definitely think back to when I was a kid. And now at my age now can look back and think, oh my gosh, like what was I thinking, with that? But I know what I was thinking. I was thinking this is exciting and it's kind of fun and being a little bad. And I think also where if you knew me, my good friends, they would tell you like I was no goody two shoes. And I think there was a perception because I did decently in school, even though I hated school, but I was able to navigate it, that I think certain adults had certain perceptions of me. And I kind of liked the idea of breaking out of that, in some ways. And I hung out with friends who now looking back, all of them had ADHD, of course, like birds of a feather, we flock together. We know that, Eric, from the conference. Yes. And I don't know. So it actually was reassuring to her because she's like, oh, okay, so he could, because she respects me and she thinks highly of me. I said, now, of course, let me know if there's what kind of stuff he's getting into. I said, but the stuff you described, honestly, I did a lot worse. Like, and I said, of no fault of my parents or like, I kind of was born that way, honestly.
Do you want to share some stories of some of the shenanigans you are kind
shenanigans? Into? So some of these are so I remember one time, so my best friend, Joe, he lived right next door. He was the house where like people would like sleep over and like we'd play Nintendo, play games, and everything. And I remember one night we're just, there's nothing on TV. We're like, oh, like what should we do? And my friend, Joe, he without a doubt has ADHD. Again, nobody was diagnosed. This is in the 70s and 80s. Like we weren't diagnosed back then. Some kids were. And he said, what if, and we lived on like a side street. I grew up in this town called Somerville, which is like 20 minutes south of Boston. So you think like Boston kind of neighborhood, like he says, why don't we throw eggs at cars that are going down the street? I'm like, okay. Like, I didn't even think twice about it, Eric. Like, it wasn't even like, oh, we probably shouldn't do that. It's like, sure, that's an exciting like idea. So, and all the houses are 2-family houses in this neighborhood. So we're on the top level, which was technically his grandmother's house, but she was like asleep. So we go on the porch and if cars are going down the road. And I said, now this is where I felt like the responsible one, because I said, no, you cannot throw an egg in the front, because you don't want to hit someone's windshield, because then they could get derailed and then crash. I said, you throw the eggs from the back, because no one's going to like get misguided when, something is hitting them from the back. So that was my level of responsibility.
So thoughtful.
I'm so thoughtful. And he's like, oh, that's good, because he would have really thrown it like at the front. So we would be on these back porches, which the bottom, like they're kind of sealed. So you couldn't even tell if somebody's on the front porch. A car would go down the road. We throw the eggs, and then it would be more exciting if the car stopped. And this would be at like 1 a.m, 2 a.m. So who's driving at 1 a.m, 2 a.m are people you probably don't want to be throwing eggs like at their car. But that made it all the more exciting. And they get out of their car and they would be, who the F is throwing that? Why do you come down here? And you think we'd be scared. No, we're like, this is awesome. Like, this is like amazing. And then we'd have to like not laugh like so hard, because they couldn't tell like where these eggs are, coming from. And then they, just go off, and then we'd wait for another car. And I think of like something like that. Now, first of all, if my kids told me that they did that, or doing that, I'd be like, what are you thinking? Like, you can't do that. Like, how do you know that somebody isn't going to come out and, have a gun, or like, I mean, there's so many things. Like, as I say this, I'm not encouraging people to be, throwing eggs at passing cars. But it just literally, there was no part of me that thought of all of those consequences. Like, if anything, it was, this is fun. And I felt it was harmless. And for the most part, I mean, we weren't damaging. I mean, we were, soiling the top of the car with eggs and stuff. But in my head, I'm like, well, I'm not causing like an accident or those kinds of things. Now, of course, there are a lot of those kind of implications. But the fact that I remember this one guy was going up, he was trying to figure out, because he couldn't tell which house, but he had it narrowed down to 4 houses. And we're right there on the porch. And we had to do everything to not, laugh. It's almost like, now some people, when I tell this story, and this is important for ADHDers out there, because I have been judged. I mean, like, this story, someone could hear and be like, oh my God, what a little sociopath. Like, what a little, and I can't dictate to people what they should think of me, but it was just that mischief and that sense of danger that was so appealing. It was so appealing. I felt so alive and so in the moment. And that's what we self-medicate with ADHD, and in different ways. And, so I think that's just one of many kind of crazy things, that are very just mischievous. But even in school, I loved, like, there was nothing a bigger high than being a class clown and saying a line that would get the whole class laughing. Was literally like, oh my gosh, it was flooding my brain with dopamine. And my parents would come home from PTA meetings a lot and say, Mr. Keogh, your history teacher, Miss Anzoni, your math teacher, like, you're kind of disruptive, because you're making everyone laugh. But in my head, like, I didn't feel that I was being disruptive as much, because I wasn't inappropriate. Like, I never said anything like lewd or anything like that. And frankly, I know I made some of the teachers laugh too, but the part of me that now, again, as a parent, if my kids do that, I'm like, there's a time and a place for everything. But to me, that was the thrill, was, we're not supposed to be doing this. And I kind of want to do it. Like, I kind of liked, I don't know, I leaned into that. There's something about that was so appealing.
When you said that, I was thinking about, my son, and how he loves anytime he can get that laugh, and especially like his favorite. And we had this kind of funny situation last night, where if he can get me to laugh at something that he knows that I actually don't really want to laugh at, because of like, it's kind of inappropriate and I don't want to be like condoning it. So last night, it's during the bedtime routine, and I had my guitar in his room, and he wanted me to for many years we just sort of did this, the medley of, I mean, he's 12, but ABC's Twinkle Twinkle and Baba Black Sheep, and then he tries to
Yeah.
harmonize with me while I do it. So like, okay,
Yeah.
it's fine. So we're on the third song on Baba Black Sheep, but he likes to sometimes change the words to songs,
Yeah.
and I did not see this coming. He goes, Baba Black Sheep, have you any drugs? I was like, what? I literally could not. Like I was it
Oh,
just made me crack up because I was like,
oh,
where are you
I
getting this?
hilarious. Oh, and I have the worst poker face. Like I had friends, one of the appeal I would say of a lot of friends of mine is that they're very funny. Like that is an easy sell for me. If you have a sense of humor, and I have a very twisted sense of humor, Eric, you know this, like I can go there. Like, and so I have funny, really funny friends. And when I was in school, I was the easiest target because they could have good poker. Even my son's one of the funniest people I know. He's almost 19. And like, there'll be situations like even a couple of years ago when we were going on college tours, there would just be some things like this is one college I remember we went to, and the tour guide could not be any more unenthused. And college tour guides are typically like, oh, we love it here. This is great. She literally looked like she rolled out of bed, could not be bothered by it. I mean, that already was kind of funny, you know? But the funniest part was one of the parents asked about how healthy like the food was and whether there were healthy food options. And she happened to be passing this sort of like kind of like market store on the campus that had a wall of like it was like a glass wall so you can see the food that was up against the glass. And she's talking about how they have all these healthy options and they care very much about health. And meanwhile, every single product on this glass wall was the most sugary, like Lucky Charms, Devil Dogs, Pop Tarts, donuts, like the nasty donuts. I'm not talking like good. I love a good donut, but like those nasty, like chocolate covered. They look like have a shelf life of 5 years. Every like, I mean, literally the most sugary. And so she's saying this, and I don't even think she realizes that she's standing in front of this wall as she's talking about healthy. So my son, all he has to do, he just gives me this look and I can't hold it in, but I love that feeling, Eric. Like that's a good example. Like a lot of parents might be like, stop that. Like that's embarrassing. That's inappropriate. Oh my gosh, there's nothing better than the feeling where you're trying to hold in a laughter and you can't. So
The
of course
church giggles, right?
oh yeah, exactly. Like, so I'm like coughing just so I can laugh. So it was so bad. And then that would sound even worse. And that made me laugh even more. And the whole time I was just like, but yeah, oh yeah, I've gotten kicked out of libraries and kicked out of churches and stuff because I was laughing, so loud. But um, yeah, I mean, like in college, I mean, I had a group of friends who, I mean, we were cosmically, karmically linked that we had a very twisted sense of humor and would play practical jokes on people like all the time, in ways. And, again, but there was a line like it's not like my thing was you never hurt someone's feelings or make anyone feel less than. That was like, never did it if anything, it was more at my own expense. Like I can laugh at myself, tremendously and beat the butt of my own joke. But that's hilarious when kids do that. Oh my God, that's funny.
And so then this is all in the sort of the seeking of dopamine, right? I mean, it's
Completely. It's like, and even, when I think about just even impulsive, things that, it's interesting with ADHD that, there's when you first get a diagnosis and really understand it and you think back to your life. I mean, now it's interesting because, of course, people are being identified earlier and there's so much more of a platform of understanding ADHD than there ever was. But when I think about for myself and, anyone over 30 and thinking, oh my gosh, all of this stuff makes sense. And then even with that knowledge, it doesn't stop. Like I think I'm constantly reflecting back and thinking, wow, that really was such a need for dopamine, and particularly where school was so dopamine draining for
Mm-hmm.
me, like so draining. I mean, prior to college and on, loved it. Getting a PhD, easier than graduating high school. But prior to college, oh my gosh, it was so draining that I didn't care. I would like hide in people's lockers and they'd open their locker and I'd scare them. And like, I would like, I mean, just whatever it could, just to sort of cause a little chaos, in some ways, because it was just fun. It was just anything to kind of, but I realize more and more now, there was almost like a desperation sometimes behind that. Like it really wasn't, I mean, some of it again is like a choice of like, oh, this is like fun and I'm going to do this. But it really did feel like I need to do something. Otherwise, I don't know. I'm just going to like disappear. Like it just feels, I don't know if people without ADHD can really understand that dysphoric feeling when you just feel nothing, like this boredom. Oh, it's
Yeah, it's like
terrible.
boredom is so painful when you have ADHD.
Painful,
Yes.
painful.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break. We'll get up to some shenanigans during the break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about this. So we will be right back. With whatever shenanigans you might be up to this weekend, if you are ready to go from listening to ADHD Rewired to getting your ADHD Rewired, don't miss your last chance at early bird pricing for our summer coaching and accountability groups. Join us this Monday, Memorial Day in the U.S., at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 Eastern, for our last chance at early bird pricing. Summer sessions begin July 11th and go through September 20th. Join us for 10 weeks of intensive group coaching, 3 group sessions per week, and starting week 3, 2 team meetings per week, and daily accountability 3 times a day. Plus, you'll get to hang out with our alumni and join many additional sessions, with even more coach-led sessions available as you progress through the program. And when you join us now for only $9.99, that's $999, we're also including 3 months free membership in our alumni community after your coaching season ends. We know that there are a lot more ADHD coaching options out there since we first started ADHD Rewired back in 2014. And I have no doubt that there are some great programs out there. But here's my question to you. Would you rather invest in your ADHD with a new program or a new coach? Or would you rather invest in a program that has a proven track record for nearly 10 years? This is our 37th season of coaching groups. 1,200 people have gone through our program, and we have received international recognition for being an innovative coaching program for ADHD. Our groups are really great for both the newly diagnosed and ADHDers who have been diagnosed for a long time. Whether you're looking to gain skills or need more accountability to help you use the skills you have, our coaching groups can help you go from where you are to where you want to be. And the best part is you won't have to get there alone. So this weekend, in between your mischief and shenanigans, head on over to coachingrewired.com and start pre-registering now. Add your name to the interest list and we'll get you started so you can join us Monday. And if you're catching this after Monday, after that registration event, it might not be too late to still join us for $11.99. But since this is a podcast and you could be listening to this months or even years from now, go to coachingrewired.com for the most up-to-date information on our coaching programs. That's coachingrewired.com. Again, this is your last chance to join us for only $9.99. That's coachingrewired.com. Hey, would you like me to coach you, but maybe you're not able to join our coaching groups? You can by becoming a patron at $25 a month or more. Every 4th Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 Eastern, you can join me for an hour of coaching for patrons. Our next one is on May 28th. These are usually small, intimate sessions where you can share something ADHD related that you're struggling with, and I'll coach you through it, and you'll even get a chance to get input from other patrons. And for all of you listening, if you've been listening for, say, well over a year, can you say how much ADHD Rewired has actually helped you? Could you put a dollar amount on that help? For the last few months, I've been running ADHD Rewired without an assistant or a podcast editor or a marketing specialist. I basically went from 70 hours of administrative paid help to zero. So I would really, really like to be able to hire a new podcast editor so I could put my attention on serving the ADHD community through podcast interviews, coaching, and more. So if you're able to give $5 or $10 a month or more, it would truly be such a huge help towards helping me rebuild my team. So go check out the perks at adhdrewired.com/Patreon. And real quick, to all my queer friends and allies out there, June is Pride Month, and I have a special event announcement for an LGBTQ plus panel that I am co-hosting with my queer friend and colleague, Chris Wang, over at Shimmer. We're doing it on June 16th at 1:30 p.m. Pacific. But stick around for the next break for details, or go now to adhdrewired.com/Pride 2024. All right, let's get back to the mischief. All right, we are back. So, we were talking a lot about sort of mischief and doing just these kind of off the wall things just because it was fun to do. But it is possible to get carried away and things be taken too far. But then we are getting into things around danger, right?
Yes.
And so I think about 2 years ago I got my motorcycle license, and and I absolutely love like riding my motorcycle. It's there's a phrase called wind therapy, and it is absolutely that, because it's
interesting.
And so this, and it one of the most common things you hear when you tell someone that you ride a motorcycle, oh, that's so dangerous, like don't die. It's like, thanks, now I'm just thinking about that. Right. It's like,
right.
Right. And so I was thinking about this. It's like, I have a family, I have a business, I like all these things. So like, why am I riding a motorcycle? One, it's something that it has been on my, since I was a kid, I always wanted to ride a motorcycle. And I had never even sat on one until the first day of my motorcycle safety training class. Like it was the first time I even sat on a motorcycle. I think part of it was I've always wanted to do that. Part of it was my mother always told me that if no child of mine will ever get on a motorcycle. So I was like, oh yeah.
Rebellion.
Yeah, I know, it's very mature of me. Speaking of shenanigans related to that, I had not told my mom that I had gotten a motorcycle, and I was going to do the big reveal. It was 2 years ago, at a Passover dinner. So it was at my aunt's house, who literally is 3 blocks from my house, and so like everybody else in my family knows except for my mom.
Yeah.
And so after dinner, we got everyone to go outside, and I went to go get a motorcycle. I was gonna, ride by, and like everyone in my family was filming my mom just to like see her reaction to it. And it was like, it wasn't the nicest thing I've ever done, but it was also so worth it. Like I mean, my mom and I have a kind of contentious relationship, so it was a little bit of like I'm kind of loving this, but that idea of why do something dangerous like ride a motorcycle? I think about this idea of taking risks carefully.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, I wear a helmet. Like I always wear a helmet. I am not one of these guys who's going to go, 120 miles an hour weaving in and out of traffic. Like those people, I'm like, oh my God, like they have a death wish, but like, it's probably just unmedicated or undiagnosed ADHD, like on two wheels. Right. But this idea of taking risks carefully, extreme sports, I think is a great way to really channel some of those things. So, part of it is, how do we identify what that need is, what that itch is, and how do we channel it in a way that isn't sociopathic, isn't, just harmful to others.
Right. And to yourself. I mean, I certainly remember, there was this street in my town called Main Terrace, which is this super hilly street, and it was perfect for sledding. I mean, like, oh my gosh, like this. But literally there was, between that street and the highway, Route 93 that goes into Boston, was this jangly fence. I mean, it was so unsafe. And we would sled down, and it's
On the
crazy enough.
streets.
This is on the street. This has changed though. It was a one-way street with the cars going up. So we'd have someone on the bottom of the hill that would yell car as we're mid
Okay.
going down, and if there was a car, we'd have to veer off,
Bail.
and sometimes I'd veer off and bang into this jangly fence that was literally, I mean, you give it a little give, I'm on the
Oh my
highway. I
God.
mean, literally. It was so. And when my mom found out, like she goes, "What are you doing?" She goes, "Do you understand?" Blah blah blah. And part of me was like, "Why are you being so reactive?" And I say this for parents out there to hear this, that I really I loved my mom and I had a wonderful relationship. Like I was not like, "Oh, you're so over. Oh, you're mean." I really didn't understand like what is the big. I'm like, "No, I'm in control." Because first she's like, "These cars are coming up the hill." I'm like, "No, someone yells car and I just veer off." And she goes, "But you're hitting the fence that we don't, that's not like a safe fence." And I'm like, "No, I got it." I overestimated, I think, my sense of control, which, when you're a kid, we kind of think we're immortal anyway. I think ADHD kids think we're immortal squared. I mean, because
Cubed.
I now, every time, Eric, and my kids will vouch for this, every time we drive into Boston, because it's right off the highway, you can see it. I say, "Oh, that," and they can finish the story. That they're like, "That's Main Terrace. You used to go down the sled. You would almost hit the fence, and it would go, no, no, no." And then Vovo, which is my mom, Vovo would say, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah. But that is, yeah, it is an important thing, I guess, to not assume with kids with ADHD that it's like we just inherently understand the danger, or we're interpreting that danger in the ways that other people are, like the idea that danger, like I remember when my wife was pregnant with my son, so this was almost 19 years ago, and I went to a Social Distortion concert. As you know, I'm a big fan, lover of music and punk music, and it was crazy. It was like great, again, like punk music. I was so attracted to that. It was like dangerous and rebellious and mosh pit and everything. And there's this guy who was body surfing. He probably was like 260. I mean, he was a big guy, big Doc Martin boots. I don't even know what he was on. He was on a load of stuff, flailing his legs. And he didn't mean it, but he kicked my face
Ooh.
so hard. Like it was really, really hard. The next day, we're at my parents' house for like a Sunday dinner. My mom's like, "What is that on your face?" And I was like, "Oh, it was the boot print."
Oh my
That's
God.
how hard he kicked me. He goes, "Oh, it's the the imprint of the boot of this guy. I think he was on meth or something, and he kicked me." My mom, she goes, "What are you talking about?" My nickname is Beto. She goes, "What are you talking about, Beto?" She goes, "You're about to have a baby. Like you can't do that. Like you cannot do that anymore. Like, and why are you even putting yourself in that position?" And I'm like, "Well, first of all," I was like, are you saying I'm not going to go to these shows? Because I'm going to these shows like until like I'm 90. Like that's not going to happen." But I did hear what she was saying, and I was like, I probably shouldn't be in the thick of it though, because I could really get harmed. Like I could have really gotten harmed. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a boot print. Luckily, I didn't break a tooth or anything, but that could have happened. But in that moment, he kicked me. I fell to the ground. I got up and I was listening to the music and rocking out. Like it just was, um, but interestingly, so I made a concession where I'm going to still go to the shows, but kind of be a little way, like arm's length, kind of from the danger. Now, fast forward, and I know Ari Tuckman has given me permission to share this story. So Ari Tuckman, for those of you know, notable ADHD expert, wrote one of the best books on ADHD called More Attention, Less Deficit. I highly recommend people to get it. Very good friend. He lives in Philadelphia. I live in Boston. So we would meet up in New York City and see a punk show because we both joke that our friends are old. Like they don't go to these shows anymore. We're not old, but our friends are old. So we saw Rancid, was the headliner act, and they had two opening bands. And the first opening band, there was like a little mosh pit, and we're kind of away from it. They're doing their thing. Second opening act comes on, the mosh pit opens up, and we're still away from it. Rancid comes on, the entire place just becomes a mosh pit, Eric. It was hopeless at that point. Like you are part of it, whether you like it or not. And
So
Ari and I
you and I are throwing elbows.
throwing out, bouncing. I mean, you had to see it was like, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like chaos. And part of me was like, oh my gosh, like I haven't been in this for a while. And then part of me is like, this is super fun and exciting. Like, and we were like, and at every moment, because we would get separated at times, we were like checking on each other to make sure that we were safe, because it was total like pandemonium. Like it was just, and if you ask him, as you would ask me, we would say that was a great show. Like, I mean, and I had like beer spilt on me, and like, which I don't even drink, but on a normal basis that would be so gross, but at a show it's like, like it was just this
This is
sort of
part
the
of the intensity.
stimulation. The intensity was so charged. And again, that's, kind of a dangerous thing. Now, interestingly, when you're talking about motorcycles, just as a side note, that is of no appeal to me, because wind is a sensory experience I don't like.
Oh, that's so interesting.
I never drive with the windows down, ever. Even like the idea of a
You're like my
summer day.
ex-wife. Like
Yeah.
I remember like when I drive on the highway, I want the windows and sunroof open. Like every car ever has a
Oh,
sunroof, and she like that would make her miserable.
oh,
Like
no way. Oh, no, no way. I don't like wind blowing in my face. Like, even like, I mean, I love going to the beach. I like a breeze is good for me, but wind. So the idea of a motorcycle and just wind hitting, when you said wind therapy, I'm like, oh no, that's not even like a fan. I don't even like a fan directly on me.
oh,
Like
that's
it's just,
interesting.
that's part of my that sensitivity to like wind. Whereas like heat, I could be in 100-degree weather and I'm totally fine. Like
Oh
I like the
wow.
heat, but I don't like the wind. But yeah, it's like, so it's still in me. I mean, that nature is still in me.
It's makes me kind of think. Do you think that there's a difference between the seeking of high risk stimulating stuff and like someone's like sensory profile and like what they need from a sensory perspective?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we know with ADHD that, we can see hypersensitivities to certain things and hyposensitivity. And like everything else, it's like this regulation issue. So there are things I am very hypersensitive to. Noise is not one of them. I like my music loud, but like I am very hypersensitive to certain odors. Like I really like body odor and bad breath and those things, like really, I mean, not that anyone likes them, but I really like, I almost feel aggressive,
Yeah.
like when, in the same way that people with misophonia, when they hear people chewing and stuff like that, some of that I can be sensitive to. And then there's that hyposensitivity of around things like, yeah, like danger and mischief and things like that. I'm like, oh, we can amp it up a little bit more. Like that's why even like with humor, um, I'm very aware of audiences of who I'm talking to when I think, share jokes or funny things, because, in certain settings it could be seen as really like twisted or raunchy. And then with other people, it's like really funny. And that's just the way, I it's like like the show Family Guy, like a lot of people just don't find that funny. They find it very offensive, and I think it's hilarious.
Have you seen they by the same makers Human Resources and Big Mouth? Have you seen either of these shows? They're
I've
on
Big Mouth
Netflix.
I've seen.
Oh
I've
my
not
god.
seen Human
Did you
Resources.
like Big Mouth?
Yes. Oh
Oh, I
yeah.
love it. So Human Resources is based on all the like the hormone monsters. It's like where all of those like creatures sort of live, and like in the whole world, like that they like it's so well written, and it's funny and it's raunchy and but it's smart. I love
Well,
that.
that's the thing too. It's like I love, like I'm a lover of stand-up comedy, like the art of stand-up, and I think there's like an intelligence even to that kind of humor, like I remember even when I was like 8 or 9, my friends and I would go to Walden Books, which was this bookstore in our area, and there would be this line of books. I don't know if people remember, called Gross Jokes, and the cover was this, it was just a black or a white cover, and it just said gross jokes. It was very simple cover, and it would literally have every offensive kind of joke. Now, some of them I did not find funny, because again, I don't find jokes that demean people, as funny. So there were a lot of things that, like even I think about like Eddie Murphy was so big that year for some of his stand-up that I found kind of very homophobic and people found it funny. I didn't find that funny. That's not funny to me. But if it was like gross in like a shocking way that wasn't offensive to someone, oh my gosh. So at 8, I would be in these and I couldn't memorize what I had to study for a test when I was 8 or 9, but I sure as hell could memorize these gross jokes. And I would tell them, like, I mean, I have an older brother who he is a rule follower. He's we have a good relationship, very different personality. And he's a very Catholic. I'm not. I got kicked out of Sunday school. And I would tell him these jokes. He's like, oh my gosh. And I'm 6 years younger than him. So imagine like an 8-year-old. I had a mouth on me saying these jokes, but I loved it. I loved shocking people. Like that was stimulating. And again, that's part of it too, that even with ADHD, that need of like sometimes like shocking or like almost horrifying, like people in some ways, we love impact. We love feedback. There's something very grounding and stimulating about that.
I'm almost wondering if part of that desire is maybe where if people with ADHD aren't like picking up on the subtleties in a social scenario, which is why like when you get the big feedback, it's like now it's registering. What do you think about that?
It could, I think for some people it could be. I can speak personally for myself. I was totally aware of, I think that's what made it appealing to me is I could tell a joke that I know is going to be funny, but it's going to be one that they probably heard before. But if I say something that's really just not like they think is coming out of left corner, that's going to really, and part of that is I enjoy if I'm meeting somebody and I think they're going to tell like a run of the mill joke or say something, and then they say something so like what even your son saying drug, like that's hilarious to me. Like, so I love that. I love being the recipient of that. So for me, I feel like I'm just giving it back, but I'm also aware, and this is where it can vary, obviously, for people with ADHD, who my audiences are, because I kind of, you sort of have to feel people out sometimes to know, okay, can I share this story? And, how is this person, because at the end, it's not so much that I care what people think of me. It's more, it's going to be a waste of a story if you're not really going to find it funny. It's just a waste of time at that point. But yeah, I think for some people with ADHD, absolutely. Things will register only when it is big, when it has like a big Richter scale.
I am sure that there are a lot of people who are listening who are definitely enjoying the stories that we are sharing, but are also maybe thinking, but I keep getting myself into trouble and I'm not trying to do this. So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, let's explore some solutions to help people enjoy some of this mischief without getting into too much trouble. So we will be right back. All right, mischief lovers and those who might just be mischief curious, or even if you identify as straight-laced, let's celebrate queer ADHDers this June because it's Pride Month. Join me, a sometimes gender nonconforming bisexual man, and my queer pansexual identifying friend Chris Wang from Shimmer, and a few other of our queer ADHD friends, including Vida Carey and Nathan Jameson, on June 13th at 1:30 p.m. Pacific for the most fabulous ADHD panel discussion on being queer and ADHD. Ever since I came out as bisexual a few years ago, I've been wanting to do more to give a voice to bisexual men because no, you don't have to choose. And yes, both is a valid option. Chris and I are teaming up this Pride Month to amplify queer voices and to help non-LGBTQ plusers educate themselves to be better allies. We're aiming to highlight the diverse experiences and intersectionality of LGBTQ plus and neurodivergent identities to increase awareness and combat stigma. To join us, go to ADHDrewired.com/Pride 2024. And if you want to see the panel discussion, but you can't make it live, we will be sending out the recording to anyone who registered. That's adhdrewired.com/pride2024. And if you are on our email list, I will be sending something out next week about this. So watch your email and our social pages, or go now to adhdrewired.com/pride2024. You're looking for some ADHDers to do some virtual co-working with? Come check out ADHD Rewired's virtual co-working community at adultstudyhall.com. That's adultstudyhall.com. It's only $19.99 a month, and it is free to try for the first week, and there's no long-term commitments. We have a 24/7 room that is always open. It's a quiet co-working room, and we have a bunch of different facilitated sessions throughout the week. Go check it out. Go to adultstudyhall.com. All right, back to the shenanigans.
All right, we are back. All right, so how do we stay out of jail and keep our friends and families and all that kind of stuff when mischief and that the thrill seek is, especially if someone genuinely didn't realize and has a repeated pattern of not realizing the significance of their actions around this kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is so much of why I'm glad we're talking about this, because for a lot of things with ADHD, and I don't say dictate that everyone has to see it this way for themselves. For me personally, as someone with ADHD, I feel like it's something like I am. Like it's just it's the lens of which I live life through. And it has been responsible for frustrations and dark moments. And I feel it's been responsible for the best moments too. Like it's just all part of it. And when I work with lots of kids and adults who their humor, their sense of mischief and danger has gotten them into trouble. And I think and they either think, oh, this is just me and I'm a bad person. Or if I change this, that means I have to change my whole sense of humor and my whole sense of being in a way. And that's what's so important when we're talking about ADHD, is that to talk about a behavior, or let's look at this situation, is very different. But the messaging that people get is I have to change my whole way of being. I can't be like, I am this way. Like there's just that. However, like a lot of things, it's about regulation, as you and I talked about in the podcast about food. Like I love food. I love that I love food. And I got to regulate it because, there are consequences to liking food too much in that way. And so when talking about these kinds of things for parents, for clinicians who have ADHD individuals, is first to sort of have them be mindful, like what were they, either if they were thinking, about it. So if a kid tells a joke, like this happened with a patient of mine, he told a joke and it offended people in the class. And at first I asked him, what was your intention, or what were you thinking about it? And he said, oh, when I first heard this, I found it funny. And so I want to make other people laugh because who doesn't like to laugh? I said, totally get it. So his intention was to spread joy, basically. Now, the part that he missed is that he, as a certain kind of person, could find it funny, but there are other kinds of people, whether we're talking racially or socioeconomically, gender, all of the intersectional variables, that people experience humor based upon their own personal lens. And that was the part he didn't cognitively get, is, oh, this joke could be heard in a very different way if you are a different kind of person. And it could be heard in a way that could be very offensive. That was the last thing he wanted to do. But he was scolded, by the teacher and whatnot. And I'm not saying, of course, if it was inappropriate behavior, but I think it's so important to couch and start with, what was your intention? Oh, you want to spread joy? That's a wonderful thing. And let's look at how this didn't land that way. Because at the end of the day, it's not only about, okay, we don't want you to offend people, but I want you to execute what your intention is.
Right.
And your intention was not to offend. Like my intention in being mischievous isn't to offend and whatnot. It's just, but even like with that egging situation, I mean, now if someone said, well, here are certain consequences and scenarios. And even if you just egg the car, maybe it didn't break their window, but now it puts a mess on their car that they have to take time. I would have thought of it differently,
Yeah.
but I just didn't think of it that way. And so when I explained to the kid, like, these are the different ways that people might see it, and it expands beyond this now moment, then he felt terrible about it, and he said, "Oh, I'm a bad person." I'm like, "No, you're not a bad person. So let's regulate this feeling. It's because your intention was a good intention, but sometimes our intentions are very different than kind of how our actions are. And how do you make amends with that?" And he, found a way. There was these two particular students in the class who were very offended, and with valid, for valid reasons. And he wrote out what he was going to say, and he ended up apologizing to them, and they really appreciated, the apology, because they could tell it wasn't him just saying that
Saying a
because he was
forced
told.
apology, yeah.
Right,
Which I hate. Like,
exactly.
I don't think we should be forcing anyone to make an apology. Like,
I agree. We have to really have that kind of discussion. So even like as a parent, when you have ADHD children, and I think because it was not enough for me to just be told, "Don't do this because I said so," that just didn't work for me. Just didn't. Like, and so as a parent, and my wife would say I over explained things, but frankly, I'm like, but you don't know, like especially my son is like a genetic clone. Like, I mean, we think so much alike, Eric, that it's like, it's really
I've
weird.
seen
Like,
pictures, and
yeah,
yes, it's
yeah. And so I'm like, you don't understand. Like, I wasn't the kid that you could just, my brother was that kid and my sister, but I wasn't. Like, I was like, but why do you have to do this? And why? I would challenge and challenge and challenge, but not because I wanted to be difficult, but because it just, I needed it sort of more internalized. I needed it to be relevant. I needed you
it's
to know there was some basis,
it's interesting to
behind
hear,
it.
even in your language, how you say challenge and challenge when what you were seeking was understanding, and which is not
Yes.
even, that's not even challenging. It just that the adult perception is always, because I had that same experience, and I used to say my favorite question is why. It still is.
Yes, it still is. I love that you just reframe that for me, because that's right. I was seeking understanding. That's a really good language shift, because I really wasn't meaning to be difficult. Like, I was more, I need to understand this and I'm not understanding it. And so when I would explain things like why, we need to do this behavior this way, or why, I would go into these stories and I'd have to make it human, because I know, my kids are like, they're empathic kids. I'm like, that it wasn't enough to say, "Oh, because that's wrong or that's bad." It's, if this could, by wrong or bad, could be harmful in some way that we just might not even think of, well, then that's a whole other story, in that sense.
And I'm thinking too about in maybe either mixed marriages where someone's neurotypical and another person's ADHD, or even both, but just expresses differently. If the whether it's the mischief or the danger seeking behavior is driving the other partner, kind of crazy.
Yeah,
Because I think the last thing we want to do is really suppress someone's who they are, right? Because that's not
exactly.
going to work either.
Mm-mm.
So if a partner is concerned about their partner's behavior and it's rooted in this just need for stimulation and a need for a little bit of mischief and a little bit of danger, um, how how would you suggest to those people who are in that kind of relationship to help sort of channel some of that without
Absolutely.
trying to say you can't do things like this ever?
Absolutely. Because that's so, and for someone with ADHD, there, I don't know, like, there's almost this trigger reaction of like, "Oh, no, 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 don't tell me who
It's true.
who to be." It's not even like, "Don't tell me what to do." It's, "Don't tell me who to be." That's how I feel about it. Like, it's almost like, this is who I am. It's almost, and even though my mom had I understand where she was coming from. She's like, "You can't go to those kind of concerts anymore." I'm like, "Do you know who you're talking to?" Like, of course I'm going to be going to these. Like, it's like, and the funny thing is, like, my ADHD came from my mother. Like, my mom was a badass, like, in so many ways. Like, I could write a novel about, I mean, she's amazing, amazing person. Like, and I'm thinking, this sensibility comes from you. Who are you talking about? But, um, but I did have to negotiate it. And that's the thing, because then I'm like, oh, I am still me going to the concerts. Am I, how much of me feels like I need to be in the mosh pit? I don't need to be in the mosh pit to be me. I need to be in the energy though. I need to be in that energy. And that has shifted again. That changes sometimes. We could become a parent or you just get older, you just think of things differently. But I can tell you, compared to my peers who are, in their early 50s, that I there's still like this youthful kind, which I honestly think is a benefit of having ADHD. I don't think we ever get old, like in our sensibility, because we're too much pleasure seekers. We're never
So
going to be old
true.
people.
It's so true. It's every morning I wake up and I look in the mirror and I'm like, who is that guy with no hair? Yeah, it's like, because I still like sometimes feel like 18 still. It's
Yeah, my 30th college reunion is this May. And Eric, I can't even wrap my head. And I have no problem. I'm 51. I have no problem with like I can't even believe that much time has passed. I don't feel 30 years older or 30 years more mature. I feel more mature than when I graduated college, but not what I thought 30 years more mature would be. But to your point, for anyone with ADHD, it's about funneling it where, and having some boundary and structure with it. So if you're into, extreme sports, join a team where safety and there's some level of containment, around it. But the truth is, like, there are people that it's part of who they are. It's kind of part of, what they need. And we just
yeah.
want them to be aware of, the risks of it and the consequences of it, and have that really be internalized.
There is this I'm in a couple like different like motorcycle riding groups on Facebook, and there's this really great meme that the premise of it, like I won't remember it exactly, was when someone asks like says to me, aren't you like scared for your life when you're riding the motorcycle? And the response is like, motorcycling saved my life. And that idea of like, because without that thing that makes you feel like you're alive, like what the fuck's the point, right? Like, and so
well, and I think especially, I mean, for ADHD, but working and knowing people in my life who are in recovery, that like, we know having ADHD, we have a much higher risk of any addictive, behavior, in particular with drugs and alcohol, but it could be any addictive behavior. And for some of these people, it is exactly that way. It is life-saving. Like, if they weren't riding their motorcycle or doing something in that end, and this is from my patients' mouths, like, they would be back on drugs. Like, it was just, it's just the nature of who they are. So we want to honor that, not shame people for that, and regulate it, put some boundaries, containment, some safety, and aware of consequences. But what I hear too often from patients is, oh, I'm supposed to just not like this. And I can't. It's almost like,
it's that black
if
and white
somebody
kind of
told
thinking.
me, yeah, exactly. If someone told me, oh, don't like pizza, how do you do that? Like, sorry, it's a done deal. It was, I was born this way, like, it's not going to change. Like, now my behaviors, of course, can change and how that is, but that nature. And I think I'm glad you brought that up, because for some people, it really is that. It can feel very life-saving to them on that level. But we want people safe, so that we want the ADHD gene pool, let's
harm
keep
reduction.
it alive.
It's harm reduction.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what we don't want to do is reduce joy in life. And that's, because
Exactly.
otherwise it's like, if we're always doing everything on the straight and narrow the way we're quote unquote expected to be, well, that's a joyless life. And what's the point?
Exactly. And that could get dark. I mean, for people with ADHD, that line between ADHD and depression, for some people, I mean, there's some people who clearly they have clinical depression with ADHD, but I also see a number of patients where it's not so much depression, it's that they're not properly nurturing and feeding their natural sensibilities. And I'm not saying everyone has to be bungee jumping to do that, but meaning it doesn't have to be the opposite of that either, where they're just suppressing all of that.
Have you ever seen these wingsuit jumpers or squirrel suit jumpers?
I have seen those.
I legit want to do it. Like, it's the first time I saw a video of that, I was like, how do you train to do that? And I would break every bone in my body if I probably did that. But it looks so like the thrill of that to me is like, oh God, that seems amazing.
Now, see, that's funny. That's one of those things, the idea of like jumping out of a plane. And then once I had children and I'm not saying or pass judgment for people who this feel differently. I that almost is not a desire. Whereas now, right before, we were speaking earlier about like, I'd like to run a marathon. And that almost to me feels like like, I don't know, like this rebellious sort of thing, even though some people would look at it, but all the training and everything and the idea of pushing my body, it's like, who says I can't do it? Like that kind of way,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
want to do it safely. I don't want to harm my body.
Right.
Like if I'm going to do it, I have to really allow myself the right training and the right time and all of that. So
Dr. Roberto Olivardia, it's always a pleasure to have you
always
on.
a pleasure. So much fun.
Any final thoughts you want to leave listeners with?
Just, I guess just for people to hear the stories. And again, going back to what are people's intentions, and sometimes we miss the mark with ADHD. Sometimes we aren't thinking. That's the issue. I mean, how many of us with ADHD have been asked, what were you thinking?
And
you know how many times I heard that?
The answer is we weren't.
We weren't. Like, I've been asked that so many times in my early life, and I'm like, I don't know. Or I would say like shenanigans. Like, that's what I was thinking. It was shenanigans. Always comes back to shenanigans, Eric.
I think that's a good place to stop. Thank you so much, Roberto. It was always good talking with you.
Same here. Take care.
I want to thank Dr. Roberto Olivardia for joining me once again for this week's episode. Hey, did you love it? If so, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or any podcast app that accepts reviews. And of course, another way to share the love is sharing this episode with friends, family, support groups, or wherever you hang out on social. We'll be back next week as we continue our Coaches Roundtable series, where we'll be talking about daily and weekly planning. All right, my lovely humans, I'm recording this outro past 11 p.m. on Friday night. So please support my work and my work-life balance by becoming a patron so I can hire a new podcast editor and not be working past 11 o'clock on a Friday night. Go to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon to show this show some love with your financial support. This is Eric Tivers, and I just want you to know that I think you're awesome.